Please welcome to the TEDxSF stage, David Ewing Duncan.
How's everybody doing? Great? Oh, you can do better than that. Come on. How's everybody doing? All right. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. As we talk about all of the monumental work that's being done and all the efforts around keeping people healthier, making people healthier, and wellness, I'd like to have a little thought experiment here, if you will, around the following question. And this is sort of assuming that we might actually succeed at this. And the question is, will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 164? And this is, of course, a riff on the classic Beatles song, When I'm 64. And I'm taking this, if you remember, Paul McCartney was actually he was in his teens when he originally wrote When I'm 64. And he was imagining that distant time when he might actually be 64 years old. Extraordinary age. Well, I would ask you to imagine living to 164. And it's been interesting, as a journalist, I get to talk to a lot of the people that you're seeing speaking here, a lot of amazing scientists and people working in technologies. And a couple of years ago, even a skeptic like me, that's what I'm trained to do as a journalist, began to realize that a lot of these technologies are converging in ways that we might not expect or even appreciate. And one of them is that it's very likely that we'll be pushing lifespan way beyond the borders that they now inhabit. So before I get into that, though, and explain some of the science, I'd like to share with you a survey. Because of the time here, I'm not going to ask you this question, but I would like you to think about it. How long do you want to live? And I've asked about 30,000 people in various talks to answer this question. And just to make it easy to quantify, I'm going to give you 4 possible answers. 80 years, which is the life expectancy in the West right now. 120 years, which is about as long as any human being has ever lived. 150 years, which would assume some kind of push out there beyond the natural boundaries right now. But I'm not telling you there is a pill or something. You can imagine that. But just think about that. And then forever. And living here near Silicon Valley, the forever answer gets a lot of play, although when I go out around the country and different parts of the world, that doesn't quite get the play it gets around here. So let me share you the results. 32,000 people just about have answered this question now, and almost 90% of the people want to live somewhere between 80 and 120. Most people, 80, the life expectancy. And it's interesting to think about this, especially in what I write about, all these wonderful new technologies that are being developed, where this is all heading and how people are thinking about something as critical as how long they want to live. Only about 10% want to live to be 150, and 3% or so forever. Although we've been taking an online survey, which I would love for you all to participate in, whenim64.com, and the forever people are voting heavily since we went online, so it's actually moved from 1% to 3%. So what are the types of science and technology that might get us to this moment? We're talking a lot here about healthy living, and that certainly is one. And in fact, it's getting high-tech in certain ways around predictive and preventive medicine, genetic tests that can predict disease, that sort of thing. But this has gotten us where we are now. In fact, in our country in the West, we have a life expectancy of nearly 80. And that's almost doubled in the last 100 years. So that's a very important one, and most of that has come from good health and hygiene. Only lately has the technology really kicked in. There's also genetics, a lot of amazing work being done. We aren't mucking around with human genes yet, although there are a couple of highly experimental clinical trials going on right now where you're actually rewriting genetic code. But we do have a lot of drugs that act on the proteins that are expressed by genes, and some of which may have the side effect, if you will, of extending lifespan. We're combining machines in people. This 58-year-old woman was paralyzed 15 years ago. She has a brain implant, which allows her to operate this prosthetic arm using only thought. And she actually had her first cup of coffee that she essentially delivered herself last year during an experiment. And then finally, we have regeneration. And regeneration around stem cells is already happening. In fact, it's fairly routine for cornea people who have lost their corneas through an accident or something. You can take their own stem cells, grow new corneas in a petri dish, and implant them surgically. And I've seen this done. I've met people who have had their eyesight restored, including a man in India when I was there who saw his children for the first time since he'd had an accident 11 years earlier. Now, we've already been running this experiment about life expectancy. And the United Nations, in fact, has projected that we will continue to push life expectancy, both in the developed and the developing world, curiously enough. And we should kind of max out close to 100 years old in the next century. So even without all these exotic fixes, we are heading towards a really interesting moment where you will have billions of people potentially living into their 90s or beyond. And then finally, I ask people, as I was taking this survey, what are the upsides and downsides of why they voted the way they did? Why would they want to live to be 164 or not? And I'll just quickly go through some of the answers that I got. One of the upsides of living that long is you can spend more time with friends and family. You can learn to play the piano later on in life. The cello. You can visit the Grand Canyon and play. You can become a PhD, whatever you want to do. Einstein would still be alive. That might be interesting at 133. And then we can see what's going to happen in the future. A lot of people who want to live forever, that's one of the reasons. The downsides, and there are a lot more of them that I was given from people, nobody wants to live to be old and frail, and there's obviously a real fear of that. We are one of the first generations, or possibly the second generation, that has seen a lot of old age, and it's not pretty a lot of the time. And in fact, this is the oldest human being that's ever lived. She lived to be 122, a woman named Jean Clément in France, who died in 1997. I will add, though, that she didn't look like this when she was 100. She actually looked like she was about 60. People worry about the cost. It's very expensive to live that long. Overpopulation, resource depletion, wars, economic collapse. These things tend to happen. If you're living a very long time, chances are you may hit one of these things. A new phenomenon here, the superstorm. You may live through several of these. Love and relationships. Imagine going out on, I don't know, your first date, the 133rd time. And then boredom. A number of people just simply would be bored living that long. So these three people here are three people that are very important to me and how they were feeling about this whole lifespan issue. These are my two parents who are in their 80s and my elder son. And when I asked the three of them how long that they would want to live, my parents, who were both over 80, said 80. And I said, well, how could that work? Are we in a metaphysical plane here or something like that? But what they really meant was they're basically through. I mean, they're both very active. They're healthy. My family tends to live a long time. They could very well live another 10 or 15 years. I hope they do. But they are old and they're frail. They're actually shrunk, which is really strange. And the powerful, energetic people that I knew growing up, they're fading. But even if I offered them a pill that allowed them to age more slowly or reverse aging, they still said that they've had enough. And this is an interesting thing to contemplate with this whole question of where we're going with all this science. My son, however, being 25, said he wanted to live to be 150, although he did say that he's worried about his carbon footprint and some other aspects of living that long. So I'd like to close here as we're heading into our break. Maestro, if you all will join me in singing slightly revised lyrics here for when I'm 100 or when I'm 64. Can everybody see that? Okay, imagine a little bouncing ball. Okay, are you ready? When I get older, changing my jeans, living oh so long, will you still be mine, hacking valentines, birthday brain melts, transient equine? If I've been married 23 times, would that bother you? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 164? You'll be older too. Wow, I hit that note. Thank you.